Volatility, uncertainty, complexity. This is the work environment that is our reality. What will leaders need to know to be successful in the future? Who will they need to be to build team member commitment? How will they need to show up to create a motivating environment for their people? Welcome to the Sal Silvester on the Future of Leadership podcast, a dialogue about how leaders will need to adapt to be successful in a rapidly changing world. And now, please join your host and executive producer, Sal Silvester, to engage in the conversation about the future of leadership and how to transform people into confident leaders.
Hello, listeners. This is Sal Silvester. I'm the founder and CEO of 512 Solutions, an executive coaching and leadership development firm based here in Boulder, Colorado, helping people transform themselves into confident leaders. I'm also the founder and CEO of Coach Metrics, a cloud-based tool we developed to measure behavioral change in coaching and leadership development. Thank you so much for joining me today to talk about the future of leadership. This podcast is all about the future. As our society and our world changes around us, what does that mean for leaders? That's what we're here to answer. And as the complexity of our businesses and our organizations increase, who will leaders need to be? How do they need to show up to be successful as a leader? That's where my curiosity lies as an executive coach. And I know that from coaching thousands of leaders globally, that what leaders have done in the past isn't necessarily the model for what they need to do to be successful in the future. And in many cases, that model is outdated and may not even exist in the next few years to come. So I'm excited to be in a place of inquiry with you, my listeners and my guests, to explore what the future of leadership might look like. We have an amazing guest with us today. His name is Chris Sword. Chris is the president of iZUMi, one of cycling's most iconic brands and a market leader in the apparel and footwear business. Prior to iZUMi, Chris had been president of Oberalp for the past 9 years. Oberalp owns brands that you know, like Dynafit and Salewa, Wild Company, and Pomoca brands. And Chris has also been a mentor and advisor at Black Lab Sports in Boulder, Colorado, a sports tech accelerator where he's advised CEOs and portfolio companies. What I think you are going to love most about this interview is how purpose-driven Chris is as a leader. He knows how to drive innovation. He knows how to build healthy work cultures. And we're going to hear directly from Chris on some of the key initiatives that he took early on in his time as president of iZUMi to tap into his talented employees and to position the organization for the future. Let's go to that interview now. So Chris, you're the president of cycling's probably most iconic brand, iZUMi. And from your vantage point, I'd love to know what important trends you're seeing in the workplace, whether it's related to people or technology or culture, business. What's showing up in your world?
Yeah, I'll take some liberties and answer that question somewhat broadly. I mean, thinking about this podcast and the conversation that we might have, I kind of thought about things from a broad, macro standpoint, industry trends standpoint, and what is impacting the way that we think about our go-to-market and iZUMi, from iZUMi's perspective, and then also from a leadership perspective. I hit the first a little bit to begin with. Thank you for that compliment about iZUMi. It's a brand that that I know. I think we both love. I know I love. It's been a brand that I've been sort of attached to for a super long time. It's an old brand. It's authentic. But I think it has not been mismanaged. It's been undermanaged. I think over time it's been, had a relatively traditional approach, and it's pursued growth by doing more things. And what we're doing is trying to pursue growth by doing less things, really narrow our focus and expand our opportunity. And that mentality, probably as much as anything, is driven by the world around us, right? It starts with iZUMi and what we can do and what we're all about, but it's looking outside and real macro trends that we've been wrapping our head around and our strategy around are at least threefold. And that, and I might add a fourth, but the three are health, environment, and mobility. These are macro trends that are at play, that are going to continue, that are really going to accelerate with generational trends, generational change. And the fourth one I might add is what we call getting off the surface, right? I mean, we're all playing on the surface, social media, et cetera. And I think there's a real trend boomerang trend to getting back in touch with personal connections. So, health, environment, and mobility are a big deal. And I'd love to tell you that Pearl iZUMi is driving those trends, but that's not the case, right? Pearl iZUMi is feeding those trends, right? And I think that's something that's evolved over time in and of itself. Is that there was a time, I think, where brands could drive trends. I think those times are largely done. I think now we feed trends, and so it puts the onus on us to figure out what's happening out there, figure out again what the brand and the company is capable of, and aligning those things. But I think that's really powerful in general for sure, and I think specifically for Pearl iZUMi.
Yeah, that's cool. I love your off the surface comment. Part of what we're seeing certainly in our world is there's such a need to bring more humanity back into the workplace. And one of our core values at 512 Solutions is connection with people, connection with our clients, connection with whoever. And there's just so much more that I think is needed, certainly in the workplace. So health, mobility, the environment, is that what you said was the second one?
The third. Yep.
Yeah. So tell me about, let's go through each of those. Tell me what you're noticing in this trend around health.
Yeah. So it's signaled by a lot of different things, right? I mean, there's, just when you see what's happening with companies like Peloton, when you see what's happening with, certainly in our space, things like, SoulCycle and the proliferation of exercise, CrossFit, options that are out there. And certainly when it comes to natural foods and gluten-free and everything else that, that's happening, there is a move back, and I think maybe an acceleration of a reorientation towards health and well-being. And, that is something that plays out, yes, on the food, natural food side, as well as, athletics and sports. So I think it's one that, again, like I said, and I'll say the same thing about all three, they exist, and I think they're accelerating.
Yeah. So then there's the second trend is around environment. What are you noticing?
You know what? I mean, it is super clear that, I will start inside and go outside. It's super clear inside in our company that there's just so much passion for the environment. And it's very true as we look to the outside in general that, that there is more and more appreciation and attention to being responsible, right? At least at minimum. And we've said at Pearl iZUMi for a long time, we will be responsible because it's the right thing to do. But what's more valuable for us is to focus, align, and create a perspective that is uniquely Pearl iZUMi, and and really make a broader impact. The environment is just, I would be, just kind of, underestimating, what your audience already understands, right? From global warming and all the way down, right? Yes. It's at the top of consciousness. But how do you deal with it? How do you approach it as a brand like Pearl iZUMi? It's just super clear that it's core, to our mission and our values, and it's core to our employee base, and it's core to our consumers. And when you look at consumers, then maybe even a little bit more deeply from a generational standpoint, millennials, Gen Z are only going to care more. And then from a cycling standpoint, we're talking about, our audience is bike riders, and, and bike riders want to recreate in the environment. They want to commute in the environment. They want to maintain and enhance the environment. So it's a broad trend, again, that has a lot of relevance for us.
Yeah. It's interesting because we hear so much about the millennial generation. And to me, part of what they're bringing back to our world is, how do I even describe it? Like, the ability to touch and to feel and to appreciate some things that are so real that maybe we've lost a little bit in our environment. Right. I think an appreciation for our environment and for health and mobility, they're bringing those elements back into, or they're elevating the importance of that in our workspaces. We know those are going to become more and more important for businesses moving forward.
Yeah, the whole thing around experiences, right? I mean, it's really true, and it's hard to really wrap your head around, obviously, because consumerism is alive and well. But I think with passing generations, you're seeing more attention for experiences, personal connections, again, getting off the surface, which is kind of, you could argue, right? Because obviously social media and, and
Yes.
devices that are so pervasive, and certainly they're pervasive in those generations. But I think that's producing, again, a little bit of a rebound effect, where they want, people need personal connections. It's just not going to change. Some of that can happen through technical means, but it can't replace entirely, the personal connection. That's really critical for millennials. There's just no doubt.
Why is it so critical in the business? We do rely so much on technology, whether it's email, text, Slack, fill in the blank. But what's unique and special about that personal connection?
It's a really good question, right? Because there's lots of maybe trends that have been pulling us apart. Remote working and like you said, video conferencing and et cetera. But I think that is, again, just a human necessity, personal connection that is critical. I will diverge for a second. I took a sociology class in college, about 100 years ago. And we talked about the two professions with the highest rate of suicide. And it's a fun trivia question. I don't even know if it's true anymore, but I won't quiz you, but the two were toll booth collectors and dentists. And,
wow.
And your next question is why? And the reason that, that was given is because it's a high volume of personal interaction. You see lots of people, but your interaction with those people is very shallow.
Yeah.
Right. So it's important for us to connect. We have to connect with people on a human level. Some of that can happen, through a computer, but not all of it. So it can, computers are going to take us so far, but then there's going to be a rebound. There just has to.
Yeah. I think you're right. And part of where my curiosity lies is how do leaders need to think differently with some of these trends that you mentioned, even just beyond the consumer products industry in general, when it comes to health, environment, mobility, technology, connection. How do you think leaders need to think differently in the future?
Yeah, I think, broadly, it's interesting to me. It's a lot of what you need to be good at in your personal life, you need to be good at in your professional life. I think there is really a blending of the two. Personal connections are really critical. One of my favorite sayings is, leadership is personal, not positional, right? I mean, it's fine that you have a big title, president, CEO, whatever it might be, but that gives you a bit of authority, but it doesn't give you leadership. Leadership is personal. It's about communication. It's about trust. It's related to that, I would say is the critical importance of modeling, right? As a leader, you cannot simply dictate that this is the way I expect you to act. You have to model. And that's a little bit of lead by example, but I think there's more to it now. Leading by example to me, doesn't have enough depth to it. Modeling is important because you really have to be super clear about what it is you expect and then model it, not just do it, right? You have to really communicate and create that trust that, that creates that connection.
Yeah. And in many ways, it's the foundation of credibility, the trust, the communication, the modeling. If you want people to follow you, you really have to establish yourself through those means. And if you want credibility, you mentioned part of your growth strategy at Pearl iZUMi is growth by less. Tell me more about your thinking behind that. Oftentimes we think the opposite, how do we grow by acquisition or by adding more product lines or by diversifying our product base? Growth is less was a similar strategy that I think Steve Jobs employed when he came back to Apple. How are you approaching it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I hope I have a good answer for it. It's, because Pearl iZUMi, as I said, was really doing the opposite for years and years. It was more channels, more product lines, more countries, more distributors, more products. And, a good example of, broad example of that for Pearl iZUMi was getting into the run business, right? Pearl iZUMi is a almost 70-year-old brand that was founded by a father giving his son a bike jersey and inspiring him to create a cycling apparel company. And then a number of years ago, we diversified into run. And it was as I was being recruited, I've been with the company now for a little over 2 years,
Right.
we made the decision to exit run. And it was one of the things that was a proof positive to me that this brand that, again, as I said earlier, I've been kind of attached to for so long, was serious about focus, was serious about getting back to what it's good at and what it stands for. So that's, at a high level, it's, it is cycling. But then even beyond that, it's taking I will expand on the idea of depth, right? The only way that you can narrow your focus and expand your opportunity is in my mind, is if you go deeper, right? Because the surface is the products you're offering and the channels you're selling them through. Most cycling brands, and this principle is generally true in other arenas as well, but cycling brands basically look at the landscape on 2 dimensions. What do you ride and how often do you ride?
Right.
So are you a road biker, mountain biker? Maybe, okay, now there's gravel, right? So as we segment and sub-segment, what do you ride? And then how often? Do you ride a lot? Do you ride a little? If you're a road biker and you ride a lot, you're going to buy an expensive bib. If you're a mountain biker and you ride a little, you're going to buy an inexpensive, pair of baggies. I mean, that's shallow. That's 2-dimensional.
Right.
If you want to tie together cyclists in a meaningful way, you have to go deeper. And by going deeper, you can narrow your focus, and expand your opportunity, because you're going to connect with consumers in a more meaningful way. You are going to connect with consumers that that span a wider consumer base, right? Because you can't narrow your focus and say we're going to focus on these 100 consumers. You have to narrow your message and narrow what is meaningful to your brand, so that you can connect with a broader consumer base. And there is no space, by the way, certainly in the broad sporting goods, active living environment, that I'm more optimistic about than cycling. Because although core cycling products and frame sales have decreased a bit over recent years, the broader trend around bike share and urban and commuting and all things bike is, there couldn't be any more optimism what cycling represents to people. And
right.
And then it's just a matter of figuring out how to connect with that.
Yeah, that's really powerful. It does take it deeper. When we think about our business, we offer coaching and training services, but really our business is about personal transformation. And part of what I'm hearing you say is you're in the cycling business, but it is deeper than that. What would you say happens to people when they experience your brand, or what is it that you want that consumer to feel when they are experiencing your brand?
Well, I mean, that is such a good question. And it's a simple answer in my mind, and a really complicated execution.
Yes.
But it's the why, right? People don't buy what you do; they buy why you do it. And that's stealing a line from Simon Sinek, but it's really critical, I think, in general, and really critical for us in the space that we're in. It's a relatively simple concept that truly successful companies completely appreciate. You mentioned Steve Jobs. I think Apple is one that has nailed it on people buying, not what they do, but why they do it. And it's something that has always existed for iZUMi, but we pulled out of the equation. And that, fundamentally, if you want to hang a moniker on it, it's our mission and our values. So when I first arrived a couple of years ago, it's one of the first things I looked for, and I found them. We had a mission and vision, but I joke that these things should be forever. But the asterisk is if they're done right. So we didn't define them well. They did not say why. They didn't give us the why. They gave us the what. So we went through a 10-month process, and we identified the why. And our why, our mission, is to unlock the power of inspiration and impact. And our values are trust, craft, empathy, impact, and +1. And it was 100% participation from the employee base.
Wow.
Like I said, it was a 10-month process. The answer was in the building. We had to tap into it. We also needed the building to be invested in it and have their fingerprints. So that to me is really the key. Is you've got to identify the why. And lucky for us, that why is 100% internal, right? And we hope that it resonates with consumers. Yes. Our vision is has some external elements to it, which is our vision is to own the space and not the race, and that sort of connects it. So, kind of forgot the core of your question, but I'll keep going. It's the idea that
nailed it,
right? The why is so important for us, and our brand campaign, and our tagline is "Here we go," is the external communication vehicle for the depth of our message, right?
Yeah.
You can't explain all that fun business strategy and depth of feeling that comes from, from the creation of that mission for our team. But you have to communicate that to the outside world, because that's who we are. And, and we want to attract people who feel a similar way. So that's, the critical part of that whole equation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can see it and I can sense it and feel it as I'm connecting with you. And even as I do other things, like I'm out on a ride and I can see the apparel that people are wearing and how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
And what I see when I'm on your website, I love the deeper sense of purpose that you're creating. And I think all leaders can really learn from that in their business. Enron's first value was integrity. It's kind of a funny thing. You think about values, you think about that deeper why that you're talking about. And in so many instances and cases, they're really just pretty posters on the wall. They don't have any meaning and depth, but when they do, you can always see it and feel it in an organization, the employees and the culture. I'm really curious about how did you involve people to come up with that? You said it was internal. You said it needed to come from within. What were a couple of ideas, maybe lessons learned that you took away from going through that 10-month process?
It's really, it really exposes you, right? I mean, you were asking 100% of the team to put their fingerprints on something. And, there's risk in that, but I don't see any good alternative, and when I say 100%, it's at minimum people were involved in surveys, but there was a high percentage, in the neighborhood of a third that were involved in groups and subgroups to really bring it to life. And I mean, what I learned is there's an incredible amount of talent and passion in our group. And that, as much as anything, pulled it out, because it's amazing how motivational that can be when you ask people to think about what matters, right? Yes. So we're not talking about zipper pulls or even marketing campaigns. We're talking about, why we do what we do. And it just absolutely energized the team. I mean, it's one of those things, honestly, now is, our chance to really activate it, and to your point, like really bring it to life. And we have, of course, we've put the value, we have these incredible, honestly, the values logos, and they integrate into a key, which ties to the idea that the values unlock the power of inspiration and impact. Love it. And all this stuff. Right. And, and literally they're on the window, and that, so you figuratively don't want them to be window dressing and so now the pressure is on, really living those values. But I was going to joke a second ago that, I wish I could do that 10-month process, every couple of years, because it is so invigorating and pulls the team together. But now we have the power of having gone through that process and to find something that's meaningful. And we integrate it in practical ways. I mean, our performance reviews used to be 100%, quantitative goal focused. Now they're 50% goals and 50% values. So it's not just what you do, it's how you do it, right? It's, you might miss your goals, but live the values in a really meaningful way. And there's risk-taking opportunity in that. You might nail your goals and do it in a miserable way, relative to our values, and 50% of your feedback is going to come from that. So we have to bring them to life, but we do that in many different ways.
Yeah. Really, what I want to emphasize for all of our listeners that are tuning in is the what and the how that you just brought up. And they're both important. I love how you're rewarding both. We got to get results. We've got to get it done. If we want to stay in business, it's critical for our success. But how we go about doing that is equally important. And I think leaders often miss the how, and ultimately it's usually the how that derails them in the workplace. Love the emphasis on both the what and the how.
Yeah. And just expanding on that perspective a little bit. I mean, I do think that a high performing, motivated team focused on the why is probably the only true competitive, sustainable competitive advantage. I mean, really, it's not product, it's not innovation. It could be a patent. Patents obviously expire, right? Yes. The truly sustainable one, is to have that team, that team gel, that cohesive, connection to the why. If you have that, and it is not something you ever rest on, right? It's that competitive advantage is only sustainable if you tend to it continuously. But I do believe that to be true.
Yeah. And listen, Chris, that, I asked you a question earlier, why is that personal human connection so important? And I think what you just said maybe even goes back and answers that question. If that truly is an organization's competitive advantage, the way that people connect, the way that people collaborate, that human factor, then that the connection piece is so critically important. I think it also speaks to culture. I saw on your website, Pearl iZUMi's culture is comprised of innovators, product testers, cyclists, marathoners, triathletes, rec league all-stars, dog lovers, thrill seekers, gluttons for punishment, brewmasters, and on and on. So cool. How do you build a successful culture? You just talked about certainly the values and the why. Any other things that you've learned in terms of really creating that culture?
You know what? It is it's a moving target, right? I love the word culture, because culture exists whether you choose to create it or not. We have a good culture by default. We aspire to have a great culture. Another thing that we have done, which is a big effort, is we have defined and worked hard to create 4 big goals, BHAGs, and one of them is around culture, and it specifically says that at the end of this time period that our BHAGs are focused on, we want a transformational culture, is what we call it. So you have to be intentional about it, right? We are sitting within a company called Pearl iZUMi, within a space called cycling, that has so many positive attributes to it. We're doing a lot of good things. We're making really good progress. So again, we do have a good culture, but to really accomplish all of our BHAGs and our big goals, we have to have a great culture. We've identified that. We've joked about, you joked about Enron the other day. I won't call out another, East Coast athletic stick and ball brand that, is notorious for a bad culture, and has been wonderfully successful. We don't believe that we can be successful without a culture. That's not, for our strategy to work, that needs to be a big part of it. So we're intentional about it. We focus on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We focus on, our team as brand ambassadors. We focus on talent management. One of the big changes that I made was to, transition our VP HR from HR to a VP talent, because we want to focus on talent. You have to be really intentional about the things you do to, attract, retain, reward, et cetera, the best talent. So it starts with, I think, being very intentional and very thoughtful about what does a good culture for Pearl iZUMi mean, not in general, but for us mean, and then build to it, right? It's not something that you can just take lightly and hope it comes together.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I one of the things I've always admired about you as a person and as a leader is the purpose-driven aspect that you have. And I can hear it in your language: intention, focus on the why, how you're building culture. You mentioned diversity, equity, and inclusion. What's an example of how that is an important aspect of your culture?
Yeah, it's there's an organization in the outdoor industry called Camber Outdoors, and they're a good thought leader. There are others as well in the space. We leverage some of those thought leaders to help us with the answer to that question. But for us, it's if we want to interact with a diverse consumer base, and as I talked about earlier, cycling consumers, it's super easy to generalize, right? I mean, we use stereotypes to make life easier, and you can stereotype mountain bikers versus road bikers, what have you. There's so much diversity in the cycling space, and if we want to tap into and communicate with that diversity, we need it on our side too. And it hasn't always been the case. I mean, there's been times in Pearl iZUMi's history where it was populated with very traditional thought relative to what cycling is and should be. So we're just really trying to connect with the consumer as part of the strategy to do that. And it's part of that strategy, and it's part of the culture strategy that I mentioned earlier, is really cultivating that diverse thought, but also cultivating an environment that pulls out, embraces, and and reacts to that diverse thought well. One of our values I mentioned earlier quickly is empathy. Empathy is super critical. It's not about understanding other people, and we're very clear about that. It's about seeking to understand other people because we can't understand.
Right.
I can barely understand my wife or my son. Right? We try. You seek to, and so that's a really important perspective for us. And then you have to be really clear about how you go about doing that. We have an executive team at iZUMi. We have 4 VPs, and we have been pretty intentional about making that as one of many examples. An even gender split. So we want gender diversity. We want ethnicity and background. Every kind, but we don't want it just to have it. We want it in a way that we can leverage that diversity of thought.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. That's it's pretty awesome. That diversity of thought, almost always leads to better business outcomes. And, that's kind of the side benefit of having a focus on that in other areas.
Right.
I know that you've made choices to align your career with your passion, and you're passionate about skiing and cycling and so many other things outside. And now again, you're leading this cycling organization. I've done the same in the sense that climbing is a passion for me and fitness is a passion for me. Give us a little bit of context on how fitness, health is important to your life as a leader.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting. If I really go back again a long way, coming out of undergrad, I took a job that I think was a facilitator for me. It was, gave me diverse experience because I knew I wanted to go back to business school. While at business school, it was one of the perspectives that solidified for me, and that's the idea that subject matter matters. I love business. I'm a student of business. I'm entertained by it, but I also know that when I apply that perspective to subject matter that I care about, it's more powerful. So yes, cycling and skiing and motorsports in my past and some other things that I've done have all been focused around things that I care about, even technology inclusive to that idea. But for the last, 17, 18 years or so, it's been in sporting goods and active living. And one of the things I love about it is I love those categories. And as I said, it helps, fuel, some of my success, I think, and certainly my enjoyment, which is connected to success.
Right.
And when you talk about active living, yes, it's a super important thing for me. I'm a relatively old father, and and if I'm gonna stay young and keep up with them, right? It's great, and it's funny too, actually, because you mentioned I've been in the ski business, I've been in the bike business. There's a saying in the ski industry that if you want to ride, if you want to ski a lot, you need to be in the bike industry, right?
Oh, interesting.
Because your busy season is the winter. So if you're in the ski industry, you're too busy to ski. Lucky for me, in the bike industry, you can ride all year long. But we have lunch rides every day. I wish I could tell you that I made them every day, but having that element of it where it's just part of what you do, and it makes you it makes us better at what we do if we get on the bike and we experience things from the saddle as much as possible. So it does connect things that are important to me and helps me maintain a healthy lifestyle when I'm working and traveling too much.
Yeah, of course. I've got a 6-year-old and 3-year-old, so I get it. A little bit of an older dad with kids that age, and we've got to take care of ourselves. One last question: what's your advice to the busy, stressed, results-oriented executive around health? How do they add more health and/or fitness or mental well-being to their lives? Any perspectives on that?
I would probably put that in the exact same, I'll sidestep the question by giving a broad answer, but, the same way that we have business strategies and we're purpose driven from a business perspective, we need to be purpose driven from a personal perspective. So, if it's worth doing, it's worth putting a plan around. Right. And, if your plan is you want to, bolster your education in a certain arena, then you've got to put a plan together and decide what books you're going to read and what seminars you're going to attend. And if you want to be fit, you have to put a plan together. This is what I'm going to do on Tuesday mornings and Thursday nights, and put it on the calendar and schedule it. So I believe it absolutely should be a priority, because things will fall apart if your health falls apart.
Right.
So to the extent that you can keep yourself healthy, make it a part of your plan.
Chris, you're an amazing man, human being, leader. Thank you so much for being on this podcast today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sal. I say the exact same thing right back to you. You're wonderful. And I appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Thanks, Chris. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Sal Silvester on the Future of Leadership podcast. You can get session notes on our website at 512solutions.com. That's the numbers 512solutions.com. Please follow and like the podcast on iTunes or wherever you're tuning in. And if you want to learn more about how we can help transform your people into confident and action-oriented leaders, please check out our website at 512solutions.com. I look forward to continuing the conversation about the future of leadership. I'm out.